On April 21, 2023, the tranquility of a suburban neighborhood was shattered when the police arrived at the home of Jerry Jensen. His wife, Kristen, frantic and distressed, had called 911, reporting that her husband was missing. She explained to the officers that Jerry's phone, keys, and car remained at home, but there was something even more unsettling. The bathroom door was gone. A potent smell of bleach hung in the air, raising alarm bells for the investigators. Just as they began to piece together the mystery of Jerry's disappearance, a call came in from the local landfill. In a tragic twist, Jerry's body had been discovered, and the signs pointed to a violent end. Multiple stab wounds marked the cause of death. With a long, menacing blade as the murder weapon, Kristen was brought in for questioning. The detective, maintaining a calm yet probing demeanor, sought clarity. "You were at the VA hospital for the past week, hospitalized for depression. Was Jerry supposed to pick you up on Monday?" The detective pressed further. "What transpired on Sunday evening between 11 and 1? Was he meant to visit you then?" Kristen's response was firm. "He did come to see me on Sunday, just after lunch." "About 2:30? The detective inquired. "Oh, okay, so you didn't speak to him on the phone at 2:30? You actually saw him at that time?" Kristen confirmed yes, and I didn't speak to him again after that. Kristen's alibi checked out. She had been hospitalized during the critical hours of Jerry's disappearance. Shifting focus, the detective turned to the other family members residing in the home. Kristen detailed that her daughter, Nicole Thornhill, and her boyfriend, Chris Tomlinson, along with their newborn baby, had been living with them for some time. "What's Nicole's boyfriend's name?" the detective asked. "Chris," Kristen replied. "How do you feel about him?" "I know," she continued. "What do you like about him?" With a scornful tone, Kristen described Chris as a lazy, inconsiderate brat. She disclosed that he had just discharged from the Army, but had failed to show her his DD Form 214. "You doubt his story? Have you ever noticed anything strange about him?" The detective probed. "Yes, he's completely rude," Kristen stated. "I went over this morning to tell him that guests were arriving soon, and he just lay there. I tried to pick up a big black crate full of brand new PlayStation 2 stuff, and he just said, 'This is old music.' I had seen that box yesterday. I moved it behind the chair. He is a piece of work. I wish Nicole could see it." "But she can't. She's young and in love," Kristen lamented. "How did it happen that he's living with you?" The answer was simple. He just showed up. I never asked him to stay. It feels like we're trying to kick him out every day. They've tried to get rid of him a couple of times." "What happened?" the detective inquired. Kristen sighed. "He just came back." "And how did Jerry feel about Chris?" "He told me it was very disrespectful the way Chris left his games everywhere. Controllers and game pieces were scattered all over," she added. "That's the last I heard." Kristen painted a picture of her daughter's boyfriend, a man who spent his days sprawled on the couch, lost in video games. He boasted of his military service, but when Kristen demanded proof, he fell silent. The detectives, sensing the urgency, decided to turn their attention to Nicole and Chris next, beginning with Nicole. The moment the detectives revealed that Jerry's body had been found, Nicole's demeanor shifted. She quickly distanced herself from Chris, exclaiming, "Did he tell you what he did?" "What did he say? Did he tell you how many times he stabbed him?" "I think he said 3, she responded, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "Did you ever see him? Did you see Jerry?" The detective pressed. "Where was he?" "In the bathroom," Nicole replied. "Okay, it happened on the bathroom floor?" "In the bathroom, yes." "It was the bathroom door that was really broken," she added, her voice shaky. "Okay, did you switch the door?" "Yes, yes." "You put him in a dumpster? The one out by the house on the side? You didn't put him in the truck. So, you brought the truck to the back of the house, and then you drove him into the dumpster?" The detective clarified. "Okay, you didn't drive to West Palm Beach." "No," she confirmed. "He was put in that dumpster." "So you brought the truck to the back of the house, and then you drove him into the dumpster. That's where you put him. You did not drive to West Palm Beach," the detective reiterated, the gravity of the situation sinking in as the investigation took a dark turn. The detective pressed further, insisting that Nicole had not driven to another dumpster. She confirmed that Jerry had indeed been placed in that specific dumpster. However, he pointed out a disturbing detail, a floor mat in the back of the pickup truck that appeared stained with blood. The detective inquired if the blood could have come from the bathroom. Nicole quickly denied it, claiming she had cleaned up thoroughly. Yet, the detective's inquiry about the amount of blood seemed to shake her resolve. Overwhelmed with emotion, she expressed a desire to take back the events leading up to that moment. But it was too late now. The detective pressed her on the cleanup timeline. She admitted it had taken nearly all day. When asked where she had discarded the cleaning materials, she replied that everything had gone into the dumpster. Amidst the chaos, Nicole had met her mother at the door, consumed by remorse, repeatedly apologizing for the turmoil they faced. The detective noted how visibly shaken she had been when her mother returned from the hospital. Yet, it was clear that she had not disclosed the full extent of the situation to her mother. The detective then shifted the focus to the weapon used against Jerry. When he asked about the knife Chris had wielded, she revealed it was tucked away under her bed. The detective pressed, inquiring about the type of knife. With a hint of disbelief, she noted it was a two-handed sword. A sword? The detective echoed, seeking a clearer picture of its size. Nicole struggled to provide an estimate, uncertain if it stretched 3 feet in length. Meanwhile, Chris remained oblivious in another room, unaware that Nicole was divulging their secrets to the detectives. They needed to gather every detail from her before turning their attention to him. The detectives sought to understand the motive behind their actions, starting with how long they had contemplated killing Jerry. Nicole's frustration with Jerry's treatment of her mother had reached a boiling point. His behavior, leaving the house and sleeping in his car, had driven her to make a decision. The detectives pressed for clarity on the timing of their intent. When had they settled on that fateful Monday at 7 a.m.? Nicole's fear was palpable as she asked what would happen to her. The detectives remained noncommittal, but she recounted sitting in the living room, waiting for Jerry to emerge. Yet moments earlier, she had mentioned going for a walk. Confusion clouded her narrative as she clarified that they had sat waiting all night, sword in hand. It seemed they had been prepared for the violence that would unfold. The initial attack had started in the hallway before spiraling into the bathroom. Nicole clarified that Jerry had not been lured anywhere. He had simply been taken by surprise. The detective pressed her on the timeline. When had they moved the body to the dumpster? Nicole estimated it had been around noon. The detective's questions intensified as he asked if she was concerned anyone might witness the act. She admitted to feeling fear, but insisted no one had seen her. Jerry's body had remained in the dumpster from Monday until Thursday. The detective inquired about her access to bleach. Had she had it on hand, or had she purchased it specifically for the cleanup? Despite the weight of her confession planning, assisting and covering up a murder, Nicole's mind fixated on the fear of her boyfriend's reaction to her disclosures to the police. In a moment, fraught with tension, the detective assured Nicole that the blame lay solely with Chris. He emphasized that she had done nothing wrong. He had already formed a picture of the events that transpired, one that left Nicole feeling trapped in a web of confusion and guilt. The detective pressed for details, asking what Chris had confessed to her. In a whisper tinged with disbelief, she revealed that he had professed his love for her. However, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on her mind. She recalled how the violence had erupted, leading to a gruesome scene in their home. Yet, she hesitated, struggling to remember why there had been a delay in disposing of the body. Was it due to her 2 doctor appointments that morning? She explained that she had left Jerry's body in the tub while attending her appointments. When she returned, she had begun the painstaking process of cleaning and moving items. But the police were already uncovering disturbing evidence. During their search of the home, investigators discovered a bottle of milk containing a powdery residue. Tests revealed it to be sleeping pills. Alarmingly, they also found the box and receipt, proving the pills had been bought after Jerry's death. The detectives confronted Nicole with a chilling revelation. They believed that she and her boyfriend had conspired to kill her mother, Kristen Jensen. The detectives pressed her about their plans for Jerry, Kristen's husband, but the questions turned toward her mother. They asked, had they ever plotted anything against her? Nicole's response was hauntingly straightforward. It was, she confessed, pretty much the same thing. The same plan, how to eliminate her mother. The detectives probed deeper, demanding to know why she felt such animosity toward Kristen. Nicole's voice trembled with disdain as she declared, "I can't stand her anymore." She revealed that Chris had purchased something for their sinister plan, yet she was uncertain if he had used it. When pressed for details, she recalled that he bought it 2 nights ago, though the exact timing escaped her. But the detectives reminded her that the tragic incident had occurred just days prior, on Monday. They wondered how Chris had attempted to carry out their dark intentions in such a short time. Nicole explained that they had visited Walmart, where Chris had picked up generic sleeping pills. The detectives inquired about how they intended to use these pills, pressing her for specifics on what kind of drink Chris planned to mix them into. She hesitated before mentioning that Chris had suggested putting the pills in Kristen's milk, knowing she preferred a specific type, or perhaps in her soda, as she often drank Coke. 2% milk, Nicole noted. You guys don't drink that, so it might be in it right now. The detectives delivered a stark warning. You're going to go to jail. You're being charged with first-degree murder. Nicole's nonchalance was chilling as she dismissed the gravity of the situation, stating she doubted the consequences would be as severe as the detectives suggested. They explained the reality of jail life, detailing how men and women are segregated, leaving her uncertain about any future connection with Chris. I doubt you know, the detective noted, emphasizing the separation that would occur. Nicole remained unfazed, insisting she couldn't predict what would happen once she entered the system. The uncertainty loomed over her, especially regarding court appearances. The detectives reminded her that decisions about visitation would ultimately rest with the Department of Children and Families, a fact that left her feeling lost. I can't answer that, she confessed, wary of leading the detectives astray. With a sense of resignation, Nicole concluded, I don't know. She then asked if there were any other questions they needed to address. The detectives recognized her reluctance and moved on. One detective suggested they see if any further inquiries were necessary, promising to check with Chris next. We'll talk to him next, they assured her, revealing that she would be allowed a moment to feed her newborn baby. As they prepared to bring Chris in, the detective informed Nicole that she would have privacy during the feeding, although another detective would remain present to ensure safety. Your mom is down at the other end of the hall, the detective explained. It'll be just you and him. Nicole expressed uncertainty, as she had not yet spoken to her mother, but the detectives reassured her of the arrangement. They acknowledged the intimate nature of breastfeeding and assured her they would provide as much privacy as possible, asking if there was anything else she needed to discuss. All right, well. Nicole trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. Meanwhile, Nicole had already been charged with first-degree murder, and now Chris found himself in the same room, unaware that he was about to be ensnared in a web of deception and tragedy woven by those closest to him. In a separate interrogation room, Chris sat before the detectives, who were still grappling with the chilling reality of Jerry Jensen's disappearance. The officers began with simple questions about Chris's interests, inquiring about his television habits. Chris responded casually, stating he enjoyed movies and would often rent the latest releases. He named several films he was eager to see, including Iron Man and the latest Indiana Jones installment, revealing a playful side amidst the unfolding chaos. He laughed as he described his admiration for Indiana Jones, calling him his hero. No matter how old he gets, he's just like Batman, Chris exclaimed, his innocence stark against the dark backdrop of the investigation. But the detectives had a more pressing matter at hand. They reminded Chris that he had already spoken to Kristen, who had been hospitalized, and now they needed him to recount the events of the last day he saw Jerry. With a calm demeanor, Chris confirmed it was Sunday, the day before Jerry vanished. As he began to recount that fateful day, the tension in the room thickened. Chris claimed ignorance regarding Jerry's fate, oblivious to the depths of the storm swirling around him. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Chris Tomlinson had heard Jerry Jensen arguing on the phone at 11 p.m. That moment marked the last time Chris would have any knowledge of Jerry's whereabouts. Chris appeared calm, offering detailed answers to every question posed by the detectives. They shifted their focus to his relationship with Kristen and Jerry. Chris described his role in the household with a hint of pride. He explained that he contributed financially, while Kristen and Jerry handled the cleaning. He admitted with a casual shrug that he rarely did the dishes, as he was busy working. When pressed about his relationship with Kristen, he hesitated. He noted that they were not legally married, but within their belief system, they considered themselves married. A matching ring adorned Kristen's finger, adding to the ambiguity of their commitment. Detectives inquired further, curious if their union had been formalized in a Wiccan ceremony. Chris nodded, revealing with a hint of pride that he had officiated the intimate two-person ceremony himself. He described Wicca as a faith that acknowledges supernatural forces, including magic. The irony wasn't lost on him. Wiccans believe that negative actions eventually come back to haunt the perpetrator. When asked if he felt any sorrow over Jerry's disappearance, Chris admitted he was upset, not for Jerry, but for Kristen. He noted, despite her quirks, he held no animosity toward her. However, when it came to Jerry, Chris's feelings were less forgiving. He confessed that Jerry had often treated him poorly, stating bluntly that he did not miss him. Yet, he acknowledged that Jerry's presence had kept Kristen from spiraling into distress. Chris recalled Jerry's demeanor since he had moved in, describing him as snobbish. Despite attempts to reach out, Jerry would dismiss his offers of assistance with a curt refusal. Chris shared his frustration over Jerry's constant criticism of his cooking. He relished adding spices, but Jerry would complain about the smell, claiming it reminded him of something burning. Chris noted that these arguments were frequent, happening at least once a week. He found it absurd that Jerry could nitpick over such trivial matters. The detective shifted the conversation to how Nicole, Kristen's daughter, interacted with Jerry. Chris explained that Nicole, who did not consider Jerry her father, tended to avoid him. Chris observed that recently, as Nicole had been breastfeeding, Jerry would show up in the living room, seemingly trying to watch her. This behavior only heightened their desire to keep their distance. When asked about his gut feeling regarding Jerry's fate, Chris admitted uncertainty. He had not known Jerry long enough to form a solid intuition. Yet, it felt to him that Jerry had simply walked away, echoing a similar feeling Chris had experienced in his own past. He recounted a painful memory of his father disappearing on Christmas when he was just 7 years old. The unease lingered, and Chris expressed a mix of hope and doubt about Jerry's return. Chris pondered the possibility of Jerry coming back, noting that if Jerry had finally made peace with his issues, he might just reappear. Meanwhile, detectives were preparing to reveal the grim truth to Chris. They had confirmed what had transpired: Jerry was dead. When confronted with the news, Chris's expression shifted. The detectives informed him that Jerry's body had been found at a landfill in Palm Beach County. The weight of the revelation hung heavy in the air, leaving Chris to grapple with the finality of Jerry's fate. An unsettling uncertainty hung in the air. He murmured, "I'm not sure if he's coming back, but there's a chance." The thought weighed heavily on him. Could Jerry return? Maybe, if he was finally ready to move past the turmoil that had engulfed him. The detectives knew it was time to reveal the truth to Chris. They posed a chilling question: what would you say if we told you he's dead? With grim confirmation, they explained that Jerry had been found at a landfill in Palm Beach County. The weight of that revelation hung heavily, leaving Chris to grapple with his emotions. The weight of the situation hung heavy in the air. It was unbearable to think about a life cut short, especially when the victim was someone known to them. In a grim turn of events, the missing person case had escalated into a homicide investigation, with the body discovered in a landfill. The reality was stark and unforgiving. A voice filled with sympathy acknowledged the gravity of the situation. The investigator recalled a conversation had at the house, where the strategy was laid out. Family members would be the first to be scrutinized, a calculated approach to uncover the truth. The investigator explained that the focus on Kristen, Nicole, and the other individuals present was intentional. They would start close to the victim, peeling back layers before examining the outer circle of acquaintances. The gravity of the situation weighed down the atmosphere, and the investigator could not shake the feeling of despair. A sense of regret lingered in the air, as the investigator wished for a different outcome, one where no one had to meet such a fate. When pressed about involvement in the victim's death, the response was a firm denial. The only history shared was one of heated arguments, not violence. Yet, the investigator could sense the tension beneath the surface. The investigator revealed that the victim's last known activity on his phone had been at 6:30 p.m. on Sunday. The timeline presented a discrepancy, as the claims of communication at 11 p.m. by Nicole and others were proven false. The investigator's voice conveyed the weight of evidence mounting against them. The absence of the mother only added to the mounting suspicions. The investigator's tone turned sharp. Laying bare the implications, the stories being told did not align, casting shadows of guilt over those present. The investigator pressed further, challenging them to come clean. The tension in the room escalated as accusations hung in the air. The investigator's gaze bore into the individuals, emphasizing that something had transpired in that house, and they would need to reconcile their conflicting narratives. The investigator knew they were holding back vital information. The gravity of the situation was undeniable. The investigator urged them to confront the truth, stating that the victim had been speaking to someone, just not at the time they claimed. The air crackled with uncertainty as they were confronted with evidence that contradicted their alibis. The discovery of a sword hidden under a bed brought the investigation to a critical juncture. Blood traces on the weapon raised alarm bells. The investigator pressed on, stating that a cutting instrument had been found, and it was imperative to understand how it was involved in this tragic narrative. The denial came swiftly, with claims of only collecting daggers. The investigator remained undeterred, citing the forensic evidence gathered from the scene. The atmosphere thickened with the weight of the implications, as the investigator painted a clear picture of the tension between the victim and the accused. The investigator pressed on, highlighting the animosity that had simmered between them. It was clear that their relationship had been fraught with conflict. The question loomed, had anger boiled over into something more sinister? The possibility hung in the air like a storm cloud. The investigator's tone turned serious as they revealed the extent of the injuries sustained by the victim. Stab wounds to the throat indicated a violent confrontation. The evidence was piling up, creating a damning narrative that pointed toward the individuals in the room. The scene had been tampered with, but traces of the crime remained. The investigator's voice carried urgency as they conveyed the seriousness of the situation. They were aware that both Nicole and the accused were likely to bear the brunt of the investigation's findings. The investigator explored the possibility of self-defense or a crime of passion, reminding the accused that life can lead to unexpected and regrettable decisions. The air was thick with tension as they acknowledged the complexities of human emotions and actions. Chris, feeling the pressure of the moment, sensed that the time for truth had arrived. He reluctantly admitted that there had been an altercation. Anger had been a catalyst, but the specifics remained elusive. The investigator pressed him for details, knowing that the answers were critical. Chris revealed that the victim had tried to attack him, and the confrontation escalated. The investigator's questions probed deeper into the timeline of events, seeking clarity on the moments leading to the violent outcome. Chris described the early morning confrontation, recounting that the victim had emerged from his room shouting. The trauma of past experiences surfaced in Chris, revealing a history of reacting instinctively to aggression. The investigator listened intently as Chris explained the struggle, sharing how he had felt cornered and compelled to defend himself. The atmosphere was charged with emotion as Chris detailed the moment of panic that led to the tragic outcome. In a moment of desperation, he thought, if I can get away, I will. Yet, trapped in that room, he felt cornered. Instinctively, he reached for the nearest object, a double-sided sword, a weapon of last resort. He recounted the harrowing moments, explaining, I had the sword out because I was cleaning it. Then, he lunged at me. In a panic, I kicked him back into the hallway and attempted to escape, but he grabbed me, and in that moment, I just lost it. In a frantic moment, Chris recalled how the confrontation escalated. He described how Jerry had grabbed him around the neck. Confusion clouded his thoughts as he struggled to break free, ultimately leading to the fatal act of stabbing him. However, detectives were not fooled by Chris's words. They understood that he and Nicole had meticulously plotted the murder months prior. They allowed him to continue his deceit, knowing it would reveal his true nature to the jury, a chilling glimpse into a psychopath's mind. The detectives knew that their patience would soon pay off. They would confront him again when they felt they had heard enough of his story. They pressed him, suggesting that this was a spur-of-the-moment act of self-defense, an assertion Chris nervously tried to uphold. He insisted that he never planned to take a life. In his shaky demeanor, he expressed a strong aversion to brutality, even claiming he would change the channel if he saw police violence on television. His fascination lay in the thrill of car chases, not the chaos of violence. Chris continued sharing his fondness for fast cars, dismissing violence as something he had endured enough of in his life. He vehemently expressed his desire to avoid further brutality. Despite his claims, Chris was adamant that he and Nicole had never discussed the ease of eliminating Jerry or the perceived benefits of doing so. They had merely talked about moving to improve their lives, as he insisted that killing someone was never part of their plans. Yet, the detectives had a different story. They informed Chris that Nicole had provided a full confession, detailing everything that transpired that night, making it clear that his role in the narrative was far from innocent. The detectives pressed on, revealing that if Chris thought he was protecting Nicole by withholding the truth, he was mistaken. They had pieced together the events from the crime scene and Nicole's account, leaving little doubt about their understanding of the situation. Chris had given them false details, and the detectives knew it. They accused him of wanting Jerry dead, of waiting for him to come out so he could carry out the act. They pointed out that he had waited all night, tired and desperate for the moment to strike. The detectives painted a vivid image of the night, suggesting that Chris had heard Jerry moving about, waiting for the opportune moment. Eventually, Jerry emerged from his room, and Chris was caught in a whirlwind of fatigue and adrenaline. Chris reluctantly confirmed the confrontation, admitting that Jerry had grabbed him by the neck. He claimed to have turned and pushed Jerry back, yet the detectives knew the sword had been in the living room, questioning how he could have retrieved it so quickly. In response to their probing, Chris asked defiantly why they were so certain of his guilt. He challenged them to arrest him, but the detectives sought to understand his motivations, urging him to explain himself. Chris's frustration was palpable as he insisted that no matter the reason he provided, he would face murder charges. The detectives countered, explaining that context mattered, that they needed to know his side of the story. Chris questioned whether he could simply walk away if he gave them the right reason, though he acknowledged there was no justification for taking a life. The detectives affirmed his fate, emphasizing that regardless of his story, he would be going to jail. They emphasized the importance of aligning his narrative with Nicole's, pointing out that much of what he said lined up with her account. The detectives aimed to clarify inconsistencies, particularly regarding Jerry's actions during the confrontation. They noted that Chris had mentioned Jerry yelling on the phone, but Chris's timeline was flawed. With a 5-hour discrepancy, they pressed him for specifics, urging him to recall the atmosphere of tension and anger that permeated the night. They revisited Chris's earlier claims, calling into question his version of events. Chris attempted to salvage his narrative, insisting that Jerry had indeed been on the phone, shouting at someone, but the detectives were not convinced. The detectives challenged him further, pointing out that he had previously claimed not to have understood what Jerry was saying. They sought clarity, pressing Chris for details about the urgency of the confrontation. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Chris maintained that he and Nicole had never discussed eliminating Jerry through murder, asserting that their frustrations were not tied to an intention to kill. Accusations flew as they confronted him. They pointed out the contradiction in his story, reminding him that he had claimed not to understand any words. They pressed him about specific phrases he might have heard before entering the bathroom. The interrogation continued relentlessly. The detectives pressed, asking if he and Nicole had previously discussed getting rid of Jerry, given their mutual disdain for him. He hesitated but affirmed, yes, but not by killing him. The tension in the room thickened as they sought the truth behind his words. Under intense interrogation, Chris Tomlinson reluctantly admitted to discussing the possibility of murder with Nicole Thornhill in the days leading up to the fatal event. He revealed that for 4 agonizing days, they contemplated the act. On the morning of the murder, he instructed her to take a walk, ensuring she wouldn't be present when the violence unfolded. The detective pressed him for clarity, asking if he believed there was anything left unsaid that should be documented. Chris's response was stark. He understood that no words would grant him freedom from his confinement. The reality settled heavily between them. His fate was sealed, regardless of his confessions. Yet Chris acknowledged the importance of his words, not for his own sake, but for the impending judgment of a jury. He proclaimed his belief that Jerry Jensen was an evil man. The detective probed deeper, seeking the rationale behind Chris's assertion. Chris recounted a time when Jerry had been cruel. He had beaten Kristen, his wife. In this moment, he was not merely expressing an opinion. He was laying the groundwork for a narrative that could sway a jury's perspective. Chris recalled an incident that haunted him, Jerry's leering gaze as Kristen breastfed their son. He described Jerry's infidelity, insisting that such actions disqualified Jerry from being a good person. It was clear Chris was building a case for his own justification. The detective shifted the conversation, asking if Chris and Nicole had considered less direct methods of murder. Chris revealed their chilling plan of using sleeping pills, intending to mix them into the drinks of Jerry and Kristen, who were unaware of the lurking danger. He expressed a cold satisfaction at the thought of the plan's success, suggesting that it would have been a preferable outcome. Chris felt no remorse, declaring that he would not apologize for his intentions. Chris continued, his voice tinged with disdain as he described his feelings towards Jerry. He felt an overwhelming sense of evil emanating from him, a feeling that left him nauseated. He dismissed any notions of being a hero, stating simply that he hoped for a swift end if he were to face the consequences of his actions. In the aftermath, both Nicole and Chris were charged with murder, their fates intertwined by their actions. Nicole received a 50-year prison sentence, while Chris faced life without the possibility of parole, a grim end to their shared dark ambitions. Their newborn child was taken into protective custody, destined for a loving foster family and a new identity. As the case unraveled, one question lingered: would Jerry Jensen still be alive if Nicole had never crossed paths with Chris? The audience was left to ponder this haunting possibility.